Edgar H. Schein is a prominent figure in the field of organizational development and psychology, particularly renowned for his contributions to the understanding of organizational culture. Born in 1928, he has had a long and distinguished career, primarily based at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Mid-Sloan School of Management, where he served as a professor. Key contributions. 1. Organizational culture model. Schein's model of organizational culture is one of his most influential theories. He defines organizational culture as a pattern of shared basic assumptions that the group learned as it solved its problems of external adaptation and internal integration. His model outlines 3 levels of culture. Artifacts. These are visible organizational structures, processes, and languages. Espoused values. These include strategies, goals, and philosophies, rationalizations. Basic underlying assumptions. These are unconscious, taken for granted beliefs and values, which are the essence of culture. 2. Process consultation. Another significant contribution by Schein is his development of the concept of process consultation, a method of organizational development in which a consultant assists a client, not by prescribing solutions, but by helping the client understand and address their own issues. This approach is based on the principles of helping organizations to help themselves, primarily through enhancing their capacity for problem solving and renewal. Career anchors. Schein also developed the concept of career anchors, which he described in his research on career development. Career anchors are the primary self-concept factors that guide individuals' career choices and provide stability and direction over time. Understanding one's career anchor can help individuals make more informed career choices that align with their underlying values and skills. Publications. Schein has authored several foundational texts in organizational psychology and management, including 1. Organizational culture and leadership, perhaps his most famous book. It offers an in-depth analysis of how organizational cultures form, evolve, and can be influenced by leaders. 2. Process consultation revisited. This book details the role of the consultant in managing complex team dynamics within organizations. 3. Helping how to offer, give, and receive help. Schein explores the dynamics of helping relationships, making it relevant not only for consultants and managers, but for anyone in a helping role. Organizational Culture and Leadership by Edgar H. Schein is a seminal book that deeply explores the complex interplay between organizational culture and leadership. Here is an in-depth look at the key concepts and insights provided by Schein in this influential work. Conceptual Framework of Organizational Culture, Edgar H. Schein's conceptual framework of organizational culture in his book, Organizational Culture and Leadership, outlines a detailed and profound approach for understanding the complexities of an organization's culture. His model divides organizational culture into three distinct levels: artifacts, espoused values, and basic underlying assumptions, each of which plays a critical role in shaping the behavior within organizations. Let's explore each of these levels in greater depth. 1. Artifacts. The concept of artifacts, as described by Edgar H. Schein in his framework of organizational culture, provides a comprehensive lens through which to view and analyze the visible expressions of a company or organization's culture. Artifacts encompass both the tangible and intangible elements that are readily apparent to anyone who interacts with an organization. Understanding artifacts in organizational culture. Tangible artifacts. These are the physical manifestations of an organization's culture that one can see, touch, and feel. This includes the architecture and spatial arrangement of its offices, the formality or informality of its working spaces, and even the technology and tools that are used daily. For instance, an open plan office layout might suggest a culture that values openness and collaboration, whereas closed offices could indicate a hierarchical or privacy-valuing culture. Intangible artifacts. These are less about physical objects and more about the behaviors and practices that characterize an organization. They include the communication patterns that are prevalent, such as whether communication is direct or indirect, or whether feedback is given openly or privately. Decision-making processes are also part of intangible artifacts. Some organizations may have a very top-down approach indicating centralized control, while others might employ a more democratic or participative approach, suggesting an empowerment-focused culture. Challenges in interpreting artifacts. Artifacts, while easily observable, often require deeper analysis to understand fully, because they can sometimes give misleading signals about the underlying culture. For example, dress code. A casual dress code might suggest a relaxed organizational atmosphere, but without understanding the underlying values and assumptions, one might not realize if this casualness extends to work ethics or managerial styles. Visible rituals and ceremonies. Organizations might have annual parties, regular team-building exercises, or awards ceremonies. While these can indicate a culture that values employee recognition and team spirit, they could also be superficial efforts, if not supported by deeper cultural values of genuine interpersonal respect and appreciation. Importance of context in artifacts. The interpretation of artifacts also heavily depends on the context within which they are observed. For example, the significance of a particular style of communication or a specific type of office layout can vary greatly across different industries, geographical locations, and historical periods. What might be considered a sign of innovation and flexibility in one culture could be seen as disorganized and unstructured in another. Broader implications. Understanding artifacts is crucial for anyone trying to navigate or change an organization's culture. Leaders, in particular, need to be aware of how artifacts reflect and affect the organizational climate. For those new to an organization, a careful observation of artifacts provides initial clues into how the organization operates and what it might value. Although these observations should always be supplemented with deeper inquiry. In essence, while artifacts are the most visible aspect of an organization's culture, they are just the entry point for a more profound exploration of the less visible, but more influential levels of espoused values and basic underlying assumptions. Recognizing the importance of these visible cues and understanding their potential pitfalls in interpretation allows leaders and managers to more effectively gauge and guide their organizational cultures. 2. Espoused values. Espoused values in Edgar H's model of organizational culture are critical to understanding how an organization purports to operate versus how it actually does. These values are often articulated by leadership and serve as the official standards that guide behavior and decision-making within the organization. Definition and examples of espoused values. Espoused values are the stated norms and values that an organization officially endorses. These are typically articulated in mission statements, which declare the purpose of the organization and what it stands for. Codes of ethics, which provide guidelines on the expected ethical behavior within the organization. Written objectives, which outline the goals the organization aims to achieve. Strategic plans, which detail the long-term vision and directions for the organization's growth and operational tactics. These elements are meant to align the behavior of all members with the organization's goals and cultural ideals. For example, a company may espouse values like integrity, innovation, and teamwork in its mission statement and emphasize these in internal communications and training programs. The challenge of aligning espoused values with actual behavior. The real test of espoused values lies in their implementation and the extent to which they are reflected in the day-to-day activities and decisions within the organization. This alignment or lack thereof can be observed through behavior of leadership. Leaders play a crucial role in modeling the values they espouse. If leaders fail to exhibit these values in their decisions and actions, it can lead to a credibility gap. Employee behavior. Employees' understanding and integration of these values into their work life is another critical observation point. Discrepancies here can indicate issues in communication, commitment, or understanding of these values. Discrepancies and their implications. When there is a mismatch between the espoused values and the artifacts, observable culture, several issues can arise. Cultural conflicts, discrepancies can lead to internal conflicts and tensions, as employees may feel misled or may not agree with the espoused values or see them as unreflective of their daily reality. Loss of trust. If stakeholders perceive that there is a significant gap between what the organization claims to value and what is actually practiced, it can lead to a loss of trust both internally and externally. Challenges in change management. Change initiatives often rely on aligning organizational values with new strategic directions. Discrepancies between espoused values and actual practices can create resistance and hinder the effectiveness of these initiatives. Addressing discrepancy to effectively manage and align espoused values with organizational practices. Leaders can
Edgar Schein of the Sloan School of Management was interested in organizational culture, and he produced what is perhaps the best known and most widely used model. He divided organizational culture into 3 levels: artifacts, values, and assumptions. And that's what we'll look at in this video. Schein's 3 levels, artifacts, values, and assumptions, are rather like an iceberg, in that the most important bits are the parts you can't see. However, the bit you can see, the bit above the waterline, were the artifacts. Artifacts are the visible surface elements of an organizational culture. They're what an outside observer would easily see. In this way, they are pretty similar to the symbols of the Johnson & Scholes model, which we looked at in another video. Typical examples include branding, furniture, colours, dress code, day-to-day rituals, job titles, and to incorporate something else that Scholes distinguished, stories. The stories that people tell about their organisation are artifacts of the organisation and readily visible to outsiders. Whilst artifacts are easy to observe, they can sometimes be difficult to understand because there's a lot of deeper stuff going on, and we need to excavate below that level to properly understand an organisational culture. Stories give us a good example of this, because whilst there are stories that are told outside of the organisation, there are quite possibly other stories that are only told inside the organisation, and they drive these deeper levels. But critically, it's the interpretation of these stories, what they mean, which give rise to the values and the assumptions of the organisation. The second level, therefore, is the espoused values of the organisation. These are the declared sets of values that the organisation has and the norms of behaviour it expects of its members. As a result, they set out what should be done, how we should do it, and the choices we should make. Values dictate the way that the members of the organisation interact with one another, behave, and represent their organisation to the outside world. The organisation often amplifies these espoused values by public statements, visible symbols, if you like, such as statements of values or organizational strap lines that go with their branding and their identity. But underpinning everything are the shared basic assumptions about the organization, the deep interpretations of the stories we tell about ourselves. These are the beliefs that people take for granted about the organization. They often go unnoticed and are rarely even questioned. They're very similar to Johnson and Scholz's paradigm. But if you want to understand the artifacts of an organization, and indeed the values it sets out, then you need to get to grips with the shared assumptions. In 1985, Edgar Schein described 6 basic types of assumption that together would form what Johnson and Scholz would describe as the organizational paradigm. These are assumptions about the truth and how we determine it, the importance of time and the extent to which we respect it and how we choose to use it, how space within the organization is owned and allocated, and the respect that people give to it. There are assumptions about human nature, whether people are inherently good or bad, whether people can change, or whether behavior is fixed. This isn't an academic discussion about what is right. It's a set of assumptions that are held within the organization which drive its choices and its culture. The 5th type of assumption is very important in the modern world. It's the relationship between the organization and its environment, and indeed between the organization's members and their environment. And you can see how this can drive some very important decisions, which are going to drive public perceptions and therefore are going to be intrinsic to the future success of many organizations. And finally, there are a whole set of assumptions around social power and how people should relate to one another. And yes, that social power term links closely to the French and Raven social power bases that we looked at in another video. Assumptions about social power dictate a lot of behaviors, like how power and responsibilities are allocated within the organization and the extent to which that power is respected. The balance between cooperation and competition within the organization, the extent to which individuals are minded to collaborate with one another or to operate on their own, and therefore the styles of leadership which people expect and the ways that we resolve conflict and make decisions. Edgar Schein's 3 levels offer us a simpler way to understand how organizations work than Johnson and Scholz's 7 components. However, that simplicity makes it really easy for us to understand how the model works and to use it day to day. Because recognizing a culture means recognizing that below the visible, easy to grasp artifacts are deeper shared values and very deep assumptions which are driving the culture. And what this tells us is that if you really want to shift a culture, you have to shift the assumptions that underpin everything. It might be that changing some of the artifacts is a way to do this, but fundamentally, if you can't shift assumptions, you cannot change culture. Please do give a thumbs up if you like this video. There's loads more great management courses content to come.